Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look at, oh, excuse me, it's not a good start, is it? At what is on the front pages. In the next half hour, then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp, and soon to be joined by, fingers crossed, the Telegraph's assistant comment editor, Olivia Utley. Well, good to have you on anyway. Speak to you in just a moment. Let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? The Telegraph reports that British taxpayers had a hand in funding the work of a vaccine factory in the Netherlands, which is the subject of a blockade by the European Commission. The Daily Mail hears that trials of vaccine passports could begin as soon as next month. The Daily Mirror reporting on a £400 million fund for the arts and entertainment industry to bounce back from lockdown, telling its readers to get set for a summer of fun. The Sun reporting that while travel to the continent may not be possible this summer, holidaymakers may instead be tempted by Bahrain, where the vaccine rollout has been relatively swift, looking ahead to the announcement due on Monday by the Prime Minister. The Guardian leads with Baroness Doreen Lawrence, whose son Stephen was murdered in a racially motivated attack in the 1990s, insisting the findings of a landmark government report on race relations provide a green light for racists. The Eye has an investigation into private sector jobs taken by more than 60 members of David Cameron's government in the 2 years after they left, which are understood to have been directly relevant to their previous ministerial positions. Yorkshire Post reports on the significant disparity in the number of government contracts awarded to firms in the north compared to their counterparts in London and the South East. And The Star gives its readers a quiz on emojis. I haven't got time to read all of that. I'll have a look in a minute. Liam Thorp is here. Still no Olivia Utley. You're on your own, I'm afraid. Luckily, there's plenty to talk about, is there not? So, Daily Mail suggesting that COVID passport trials to begin. This, they say, is an exclusive. Tell us more.
Yes, so it's something that's obviously been discussed for a while and has sort of been hinted at. There's obviously a lot of debate on either side about whether this is the right way to go, but it seems now that the government is moving more and more towards the idea of COVID passports or some kind of certification. I think what's important to say about this is that it's not necessarily you can only go into certain events if you have had the vaccine. It looks like there's going to be a kind of three-pronged approach, whether it's potentially people who've had a test, who've had a negative test, who've had a jab, or who have antibodies. So it's obviously just a way of trying to ensure that everyone who's going to these major events is free of COVID. And I personally think that's quite a good thing. So they're going to be trialling it. We've heard a bit about this already. They're going to be trialling it at the FA Cup final, at things like the World Snooker Championships. We've actually been told in Liverpool, where I am, that the city's going to form part of the trial as well in terms of some smaller scale events like nightclub nights and things like that. And obviously this is all about building up to, what we're all hoping for, which is some sort of normality when it comes to June the 21st or around that time. So it's all about getting your ducks in a row so that hopefully things can be a little bit back to normal in the summer.
Yes, interestingly, the Mail says their introduction is certain to trigger a huge political row. Last night, 72 MPs, including Libertarian Tories and senior Labour figures, issued a joint statement branding vaccine passports divisive and discriminatory and vowing to oppose them. But as you said, it's about changing behaviour. You go to somewhere and you have confidence. What's your reading of how people might... what their attitude to this might be? Do you think people would be largely supportive?
I think when you've seen some of the polling that people are largely supportive. I think it was the same when it came to the lockdown. Generally, people they're up for doing what's necessary to get us out of this mess and get us back to some kind of normality. Obviously, the Tories will be concerned. There is a growing backbench revolt, and as you mentioned, some of the more libertarian MPs. This is obviously really not what they believe in. They believe in the freedom to do what you want. But, when you go to certain countries now, because of other diseases, you do have to have, vaccinations. You have to show records that that you're clear of certain diseases. This isn't a totally new thing. And we are still in this pandemic. We're not out of it. We are doing really well with the vaccines. We're getting to a place where things are starting to look a bit more normal. I have to say, I've been deeply critical of the government's approach in terms of containing the pandemic in the past. I'm actually pleased to see them taking some serious precautions when it comes to keeping control of the virus as we kind of build back to normality.
Yes, the Telegraph too with this, suggesting that these pilots are going to start within weeks, which is interesting, isn't it? People going to the events will be asked to take a COVID-19 test to gain entry, another after attendance. To stop any spreading of the virus, or so any spreading can be monitored. I mean, with all of this, and obviously we've got the Easter weekend, haven't we? And everyone's very aware of how many people will be out. Perhaps the cold weather will tempt people indoors or tempt them not to meet. Who knows? You have to remember that we're dealing with the Kent variant here, which France is beginning to see only too well. It spreads easily. It has high transmissibility.
Exactly, and we saw President Macron yesterday ordering another lockdown in France. Obviously, they are in a different situation and they've taken different decisions. But I've been following COVID rates certainly locally here for the past year, and we only have to look at what happened in December, previously in September, to see just how quickly these things can escalate. We were here in Liverpool. You'll remember that we went into Tier 2 in December, and our rates were around sort of 70, 60 cases per 100,000. By early January, it was over 1,000. So these things really can escalate, especially, as you say, with new variants that spread more rapidly. What we're obviously hoping for this time is when we do inevitably see numbers go up a little bit, which I think we're all expecting, is that obviously enough people, hopefully in the vulnerable categories, have been vaccinated so that we won't see those same levels of hospitalisation and deaths. But we need to keep control of it. That's just a fact. We've heard Chris Whitty talking about how we will be able to live amongst it, but we're not quite at that level yet because everyone hasn't been vaccinated. So until that happens, I think it's a trade-off, really. If we want to continue on the road back to normality before everybody is vaccinated, then we have to have some kind of way of keeping that in check. And I personally would be more than happy to abide by rules if it meant that I could go and watch the football, for example.
Oh, everyone's got a thing, haven't they? Absolutely. And Chris Whitty makes the front page of the Daily Express today. We hope no more lockdowns, talking about treating it like flu. But as you say, we're not there yet. And one member of Sage I heard on today said by this time next year, hopefully it will kind of gone away. But as you say, we're still not there yet. And we heard the message from Matt Hancock this week, don't blow it now. That's the great appeal to people, isn't it?
It is, and look, it's really understandable that people are tired. We've seen some difficult scenes of kind of young people gathering much bigger numbers, and I do really feel for certain young people who have been to university and had a really torrid time, and suddenly they've got this kind of taste of freedom, and they want to go and enjoy it, and we've seen that in parks and open spaces. The problem is if you move too quickly in that direction, and we could all find ourselves back in that difficult situation. I think what Chris Whitty, to be fair to him, has been pretty consistent on this. I remember him saying months ago, even though it seemed like it wasn't really possible, that we would get to a stage where there would have to be that decision taken, where enough people have been vaccinated and we've brought rates down where we maybe don't get to a point where we eradicate COVID, but we have to sort of learn to live amongst it. I don't think clearly that we're there yet, and we need the rollout to get to everyone. It's obviously going very well. But yeah, I think there is a bit of a building consensus that we will probably have to find a way to live amongst this virus. We just have to manage it as well as we can with vaccines and with booster jabs as well in the winter. Obviously, the winter will be a massive test because there are some suggestions that we may need extra measures when it comes to the winter in terms of the usual winter pressures that we face.
Yeah. Olivia Utley joins us now, Telegraph's assistant comment editor, just in time too, because I'm about to get to the Sun, which for reasons of being in Liverpool, Liam will not talk about. The planes to Spain, now mainly to Bahrain. Euro holds blow, but Gulf is OK. This is an exclusive by political editor Harry Cole, also of this parish, suggesting he's been given or tipped the wink that he knows what's going to happen next week with the great reveal on holidays, which many people want to know. What does it say then, Olivia?
Yeah, so it's that Europe will probably be off limits, which is huge, really, considering, Europe's our closest allies. This is really going to mess with our future relationship with the EU after Brexit. And so the EU is probably going to be off limits. And that's obviously huge for most people who have family abroad, have family in the EU. And it's going to be difficult for people to hear that. But it sounds like we might be able to get some holidays just to perhaps Bahrain, which will be a bit different for everyone next year.
Yes, indeed so. So the online copy suggests that summer holiday hotspots will be ranked under a new traffic light system, letting Brits fly to so-called green countries, which have both low COVID rates and strong vaccine rollouts. At the moment, that would leave Bahrain, Dubai and the US top destination wish lists. Nations with high virus cases and slow jab rollouts will require more quarantining. So, for example, you get green, amber and red. Red arrivals must isolate on their return in an authorised hotel at their own cost, as they do currently. Amber would be light green, but those entering the UK must isolate at home for 10 days after arrival. And then the green is anyone returning from these countries must take a pre-flight lateral flow test at their own cost, then take a sequencing test within days of landing to check for new strains. June, this article says, will be the earliest Boris Johnson suggests that borders can open. Boris Johnson publishing the findings of the Global Travel Task Force on Monday. Now, most people, I suppose, go to Europe. Liam, we heard the World Health Organization today, the Europe envoy of it, suggest that Europe's vaccine rollout has simply not been good enough.
I think that's pretty clear all round, really. You know, it's one of these funny situations where I have been critical of the government in terms of its handling of the pandemic, but you can't really argue with the fact that our vaccine rollout is going well, and that's what got us into a position where we may be able to start to look at opening things up. It's clear that in the EU things just haven't gone well. It's been badly managed. There now seems to be an element of desperation when it comes to talk of blockades and diverting things and those kind of, you know, slightly, the rhetoric stepped up into a slightly desperate tone now. I understand that in a way because obviously they're under massive pressure, but that's possibly because of their own mistakes that they've made. It does feel like on this particular issue, the UK acted pretty quickly and has managed to get that vaccine rolled out. I must admit, I'm surprised at how well it's gone, but, you know, you can't really argue with the figures.
Yeah. The Sun continuing that most of Europe is poised for amber status. The US, Gulf states, Israel could be classed as green. Malta's obviously doing well too. We speculate beyond that, I suppose. That'll be really disappointing for many people who were hoping to get away after basically being penned in their homes for months and months, Olivia. But the Daily Mirror tells us of get set for a summer of fun, £400 million fund for attractions and events to prepare for the holiday season. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so this is the good side. We're going to get this summer of fun, which we've all been talking about, which is essentially going to involve money being pumped into the kind of fun industries, into the arts and into theatre. Sports going to obviously be huge this summer. So there's going to be a lot of a push to have a big summer in the UK, spending money, which, you know, lots of people have been saving up money. Those who have been fortunate enough their jobs and being able to go out have been storing money up and are going to be encouraged to spend it in the big sort of blowout in a big UK summer. So that, I think, is going to be the messaging from the government over the next few months. There are a few countries which you might be able to travel to without too much difficulty, but on the whole it'll be travel around the UK. We'll put some money into allowing there to be a sort of festival atmosphere in the UK, and you spend your money here and that'll get the economy going again.
Well, we await more news on travel and indeed on the announcement about the £400 million for arts and entertainment. Lots of COVID news still to come, no doubt, as we head to the Easter weekend. Well, coming up, though, Baroness Doreen Lawrence reacts angrily to the government's report on race relations. We will look at that in more detail in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Liam Thorp and Olivia Utley. Welcome back to both of you. Liam, should we go to The Guardian now, which looks again at this number 10 commissioned report on disparities in race and so on, and speaks to the mother of the murdered student, Stephen Lawrence, who has a lot to say on this.
Yeah, so this is kind of the second day, really, of fallout of the kind of reaction to this report, which it seems to be kind of growing the frustrations and the criticism of it. This is perhaps one of the most important and strongest interventions from Doreen Lawrence, who, of course, is the mother of Stephen Lawrence, who has been campaigning against racism following the murder of her son for 18 years. And she said that the findings of the report, the way it was put together, some of the tone of it, is potentially going to put back the fight against racism and discrimination by 20 years. and said that it's potentially giving racists the green light, which is, really striking criticism from such a respected person and an influential campaigner. I think we've also seen today that some of the academics who are sort of referenced in the report have basically said that they weren't consulted, that their words or their research was used, but that they weren't told that it was going to be in this report. So we are seeing more and more criticism of this report. We've seen people from these communities talk about it being patronising, talk about it, as I say, pushing that the fight back, and even some of the passages, particularly some of the stuff about slavery, is really controversial. So yeah, it's another day, and more fallout from this government report, and difficult questions for the government, who of course obviously also lost a key advisor in this area just today or yesterday, was it? So I think the Doreen Lawrence intervention takes this up a notch, and it will cause real concern for the government.
Yeah, I think it was today. It's difficult because we deal with tomorrow's news in the papers and we can't remember what day it is, do we? I always get caught out. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph now, Olivia. Google urges its staff to return to the office, and I go, goodness me, no, the message is still work from home, but they mean after the pandemic. And everyone's wondered what big companies will do about how life will change, don't they? And especially these tech-based companies.
Yeah, I find this really fascinating. It seems to have been over the last sort of 3 or 4 months, quite a lot of these big tech companies have decided that the work from home shift can't be permanent, because a few months ago we were sort of hearing that this was the future of life and no one was going to go back to the office as was, and etc., etc. And just now the changes are happening, and you sort of wonder whether that's this kind of realization once you're getting more and more people starting in a job and realizing that it's actually very difficult to learn when you're learning from home. And I found that starting a new job in lockdown, I'm allowed to go into the office as a journalist, and so I have been going in as much as I possibly can, and I realise that I learn a lot more sitting next to my boss who's been doing the job for 10 years. And I think more people will be finding that. Companies will be realising that their new talent actually isn't really developing in their roles. So I think there are some of these problems which are only recognisable in the long term, and it's sort of been fudged for the last year, that as we move into the second year, it becomes a lot more difficult. So I think we'll be seeing more and more of this.
And Liam, just very quickly, very important for younger people, they're finding, whose job, work, home life, it becomes their bedroom, especially if they're in shared accommodation. You know, that's it then, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm fortunate enough to have a room in my house, which I didn't have, by the way. I actually moved into this house mid-pandemic, so I've got the evidence really of working in a tiny sort of flat, and then obviously being fortunate enough to have a room where I use my office. I found it really, really difficult when trying to separate work and life, and obviously there were young people living in really small house shares with 6 other people at their desk with their bed behind them. It's not conducive really to working.
Well, I've got to get to the weather. It's Easter weekend. We're allowed out, actually. We'll see you at 11:30. Thank you. Don't forget, as well, if you've missed it tonight, it will be available shortly and every night on our YouTube channel. The it there being the press preview. To the weather now.